I've broken down these details in such a way that they'll leave you shocked. And trust me, you'll only understand the full theory if you watch till the very end. What I'm about to explore completely flips the narrative we've been fed for years. We've been looking at the Multiverse War, the sacred timeline, and Kang the Conqueror with a surface-level understanding. But once you crack open the hidden layers, nothing looks the same again. I'm talking about a revelation so massive that it doesn't just change one movie, it rewrites the entire purpose behind Marvel's multiverse saga. And today, I'm going to walk you through it piece by piece. Welcome back to MovieCast, hosted by me, Liam Harrison. This is one of those theories that grabbed my imagination and refused to let go. Because the deeper I dug, the more obvious it became. Kang was never the villain of this story. In a strange, tragic, almost poetic twist, he was the only thing standing between the multiverse and total annihilation. To understand why, we need to go back further than any movie has shown us. Further than any character has dared to explain out loud. Centuries ago, in the shadows between universes, a force was rising. And Kang was the first to see it. Not a cosmic being. Not a celestial. Not an eternal. But a man. A man capable of thinking his way through reality like it was clay. A man whose sheer willpower could twist existence. And that man was Victor Von Doom. Now, here's where the entire story turns upside down. Because Doom wasn't just tinkering with time or flirting with power. He was on a path that would elevate him far beyond the supervillain we've seen glimpses of in the comics or adaptations. Doom had tapped into a level of power that rivaled the Beyonders, those godlike architects that operate beyond the rules of universes. Imagine someone combining the cold intellect of a scientist, the cunning of a tyrant, and the ambition of a fallen king. Then giving that person the ability to warp entire branches of reality with a gesture. That's what Doom was becoming. And while the rest of the multiverse remained blissfully unaware, one scientist, one quiet, brilliant mind named Nathaniel Richards detected the tremors of Doom's rise echoing across possibility. Through his early experiments with cross-dimensional observation, Nathaniel noticed something disturbing. Every timeline, no matter how different, eventually bent toward Doom's victory. In some universes, he forged alliances with interdimensional warlords. In others, he harnessed cosmic entities. In a few, he outright consumed them. But the result was always the same. Doom won, and Nathaniel realized this wasn't an anomaly. It was a pattern. That pattern changed Nathaniel Richards forever. I imagine that moment. Him staring at his discoveries, seeing every version of reality collapse under Doom's rule, and realizing he couldn't run from what he had learned. He tried adjusting variables, simulating alternate chains of events, even creating potential futures where Doom never gained power. But fate continued pushing Doom onto a throne made out of broken universes. When you consider that, it becomes clear why Nathaniel transformed into Kang. It wasn't because he lusted for power. It wasn't because he wanted domination. It was because he believed, genuinely believed, that the only way to prevent Doom's multiversal takeover was to control the multiverse himself. And honestly, that shifts everything. It turns Kang into something else entirely. A strategist making the ugliest decision imaginable, choosing order not because he craved it, but because he feared what waited at the end of chaos. So he built the first version of what would eventually become his empire. Not an empire of conquest, but an empire of containment. Kang concluded that Doom didn't need armies to win. He didn't need portals, weapons, or alliances. Doom's greatest advantage was inevitability. So Kang decided to act where inevitability could no longer reach. At the root of reality, time. Once you understand that Kang's transformation wasn't born from ego but from survival instinct, everything else falls into place. Kang didn't master time because he wanted to rewrite the multiverse to fit his own image. He mastered time because time is the only fabric strong enough to bind reality together. If Doom was destined to rise in every timeline, then Kang had to create a system where those timelines were no longer free to branch. He needed to design a reality where Doom simply couldn't be born. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Kang didn't immediately get it right. His earliest attempts to isolate safe timelines failed catastrophically. Some versions fell apart on their own. Others collapsed because Doom variants discovered cracks between universes and forced their way in. Kang's realization came slowly, painfully, that the multiverse wasn't something you could gently guide. It needed rigid structure, firm boundaries, and absolute control. So he forged what would ultimately be known as the sacred timeline. But at this stage, it wasn't a dictatorship or a forced utopia. It was a shield, a firewall built with surgical precision. Every universe that had a seed, a spark, or even a sliver of potential Doom influence was pruned away. Every branching event that could nudge any variant of Doom toward ascension was eliminated. Kang was operating like a cosmic surgeon, cutting away the tumor before it spread. This decision wasn't cruel in his eyes, it was necessary. And even though pruning looks horrifying from the outside, to Kang, it was the only thing preventing a collapse so total that entire existence would be erased in an instant. But Kang knew one man couldn't guard an entire multiverse, even a restricted one. That's when he made another decision history has twisted into something dark. The creation of the Council of Kangs. Most stories paint this as a gathering of tyrants, a room filled with egomaniacal conquerors eager to carve up reality for themselves. But the truth is the complete opposite. The Council was Kang's answer to the rising threat that he alone couldn't suppress. It was the multiverse's first coordinated defense system. Kang sought out the variants of himself who understood the stakes. Variants who weren't greedy or reckless but aware of Doom's potential. Together, they created a network of overseers, each watching over their assigned universes, each ensuring that no Doom-like anomaly could slip through the cracks. Think of it like multiversal firefighters, constantly monitoring structural weaknesses and reinforcing them before they triggered disaster. They weren't forcing worlds into submission, they were preserving them. The Council wasn't a coalition of villains. It was a collaboration of guardians, each version of Kang sacrificing their own ambitions for a single shared goal: stop Doom. And for a while it worked. The multiverse stabilized, branching paths were reduced, and Doom's influence diminished. But the victory wasn't permanent. It couldn't be. Eventually the cracks returned, not from Doom this time, but from within the Council itself. A handful of Kang variants grew impatient. Others became fearful, and a dangerous few began to believe they could improve upon the plan. That ideological divide triggered the first multiversal war, a battle not born from conquest, but from disagreement. Most Kangs still defended the original mission, but a few pushed for total domination as a better way to keep Doom out. The conflict tore through universes, erased entire chains of existence, and shattered the Council beyond repair. In the aftermath, only one Kang remained, the one we now call He Who Remains. But instead of claiming victory, he carried the weight of unimaginable loss. He realized that if even the most self-aware versions of himself could fall to ambition or paranoia, then the multiverse could never again be trusted with freedom. So he created the TVA, not as a weapon, but as a final defense. A machine designed to preserve the sacred timeline without the emotional flaws that had doomed the Council. He Who Remains didn't rule through fear, he ruled through exhaustion. Through the desperate hope that he could prevent the return of the threat that had nearly wiped out everything, Doom. And that's where the first major phase of this theory lands. We've spent years believing Kang was the manipulator, the tyrant, the orchestrator of cosmic oppression. But what if everything we saw was simply the last surviving soldier holding a crumbling universe together? What if the TVA wasn't enforcing Kang's will, but protecting reality from the only enemy capable of ending all existence? As Loki began peeling back the layers of the sacred timeline, he wasn't seeing a dictator's design. He was seeing a shield that had been holding for centuries and starting to crack. And that crack is where we're heading next. Because Kang's greatest fear, the rise of Doom, is buried deeper in this story than anyone realizes. The moment the sacred timeline broke, the chains that held Doom's path shut began to unravel. And Kang knew it. That's why his final warning wasn't a threat. It was a resignation. A weary admission that if he fell, the one thing he'd spent lifetimes preventing would finally awaken. When the sacred timeline first trembled, I imagine Kang felt it like a physical wound. Not a distant ripple, not an abstract disturbance, but a direct, piercing signal that the final barrier between Doom and the multiverse had begun to fail. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. Everything we saw in Loki wasn't some elaborate performance or an attempt at manipulation. It was a man who had carried the weight of infinite universes for longer than any living mind could comprehend, suddenly sensing that the end he'd been postponing for eons was finally creeping back. He who remains never smiled because he was amused. That strange, unsteady grin he wore was the look of someone who had already lived the worst possible future and knew history was about to repeat itself. When Sylvie struck him down, she didn't just kill a tyrant. She killed the last checkpoint standing between Doom and the limitless potential of branching timelines. And as the timeline fractured outward like a web of shattering glass, every forbidden possibility Kang had been pruning for centuries reawakened. Doom variants that had been erased from reality surged back into existence like immune responses breaking through a dam. It wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. It was the return of everything Kang feared most. Timelines where Doom became a cosmic sovereign. Universes where Doom harnessed multiversal energies. Realities where Doom's ambition mutated into something uncontainable. And Kang knew this scenario better than anyone because he had lived through it before. This is where the story shifts into something far more tragic. With the sacred timeline cracking at every edge, Kang's variants began reforming, but they weren't the disciplined guardians of the old council. These were unstable echoes emerging prematurely, incomplete reflections of the idealistic versions who once stood together. That's why the modern Council of Kangs feels so volatile, so chaotic, so power-hungry. They weren't born from unity or purpose. They were born from a fractured multiverse where Doom's shadow had already begun poisoning possibility. These new Kangs weren't ready to guard the multiverse. They were scrambling to understand why everything felt wrong, why time behaved unpredictably around them, why their very existence seemed unstable. They reassembled not out of strategy, but out of fear. Each Kang variant sensed that something older and darker was lurking beneath the newly branching timelines. Something that their memories couldn't fully articulate, but their instincts recognized instantly. Doom. Not a single Doom variant, but the collective influence of Doom across countless universes awakening at once. The Council didn't gather to conquer. They gathered because the last defense had fallen, and they knew the real war had only just restarted. If He Who Remains was the final shield, the Council of Kangs was the emergency alarm, and the multiverse had begun ringing. Meanwhile, the TVA, left without its creator, was spiraling, trying to understand its place in a world that no longer followed the rules. But that confusion wasn't random. It was Kang's greatest nightmare unfolding exactly as he predicted. Without pruning, without containment, without a single unified timeline, Doom's path reappeared piece by terrifying piece. What makes this so compelling to me is that it reframes everything the TVA recorded. Those branching timelines weren't harmless what-ifs. They were roads. Roads that eventually intersect with Doom's multiversal ascent. Doom doesn't need to be born in every timeline. He only needs one reality where the right combination of power, knowledge, and opportunity aligns. A single Doom reaching Beyonder level power is enough to unmake the multiverse, because once he ascends, he doesn't respect borders. He crosses. He invades. He absorbs. And Kang knew this. That's why he was obsessed with pruning. Not because he wanted to micromanage the universe, but because Doom's rise is like a cosmic infection. All he needs is one opening, one spark, one undefended timeline. When Sylvie killed He Who Remains, she didn't just free the multiverse. She unlocked the cage Doom had been trapped behind for centuries. And the moment those locks shattered, the multiverse began rewriting itself in the direction Kang fought so desperately to avoid. This brings us to the cosmic irony at the heart of this entire theory. Everyone believed the multiversal war was initiated by Kang variants battling for supremacy. But what if that war was merely the symptom of something deeper lurking behind it? What if the Kangs were fighting because the timelines around them were collapsing under Doom's expanding influence? If Doom ascends in one universe, he isn't just a dictator in that universe, he becomes a multiversal predator. And his expansion destabilizes nearby timelines, which in turn forces variants to react, leading to chaos, conflict, and eventually all-out war. What looks like Kangs fighting each other might actually have been Kangs fighting the consequences of Doom's rise. And once the instability reached a breaking point, it appeared like a civil war, when in truth it was a desperate, messy attempt to stop a cosmic threat that fought back with the power of inevitability. That's why the war was so destructive. That's why universes fell like dominoes. And that's why He Who Remains was the only survivor. Because he wasn't merely a conqueror. He was the one variant who managed to push Doom back far enough to stabilize the last remaining universe, the sacred timeline. The multiversal war wasn't a war of ego. It was the aftershock of a battle no one knew was happening. And I keep circling back to one crucial insight. Kang never viewed himself as the hero. He saw himself as the firewall, the temporary solution, the flawed but necessary stopgap between Doom and oblivion. He even said it in his own way. If you think I'm evil, wait until you meet my variants. But the real meaning wasn't that they were worse than him. It was that they were unprepared. They were unpredictable. They didn't have the discipline required to maintain the shield he'd built over centuries. And if they couldn't hold the line, Doom would rise again. He Who Remains understood that he wasn't the final answer. He was stalling for time, hoping for a future where someone else could take his place. Someone who saw the stakes clearly. Someone who understood that Doom's threat wasn't hypothetical. It was destined. If not prevented, it would echo across every possibility until nothing remained. The tragedy is that the one person who could have taken up that mantle, Loki, wasn't ready yet. Sylvie's need for revenge blinded her to the bigger picture, and that single emotional decision broke the multiverse open like a cracked egg. Kang wasn't trying to control them. He was trying to warn them. He was trying to hand off the responsibility that had crushed him for lifetimes. And now, as the timelines spiral uncontrollably outward, as variants of Kang crawl into existence still disoriented from centuries of erasure, as the TVA struggles to redefine its purpose, the hidden truth behind the chaos becomes clearer. Doom's path is reforming. The branches that lead to his ascension, the ones Kang spent entire lifetimes pruning, are reconnecting. One timeline gives Doom access to cosmic power. Another births an alliance that strengthens him. Another contains a universe where he discovers the secrets of the Beyonders. And all of these threads, individually harmless, merge into the multiversal tapestry that shapes Doom into the only being capable of destroying everything. Kang saw it once. Now it's happening again. And the multiverse is sleepwalking into the same trap. The deeper I go into this theory, the more inevitable the conclusion becomes. The entire multiverse saga is building toward one truth. Kang didn't become a master of time because he wanted to rule. He became a master of time because he was the only one who understood that Doom's conquest wasn't a future, it was the future, unless someone intervened. Everything we've seen, the TVA, He Who Remains, the sacred timeline, the pruning, the council, it all points to one tragic, brilliant, desperate mission: hold back the monster no one else even knows exists. Kang wasn't eliminating possibilities. He was eliminating Doom. And as the sacred timeline weakens, as the branches multiply into infinite vulnerability, the shadow of Doom stretches wider and darker. This story is far from over, and the full truth of Kang's role, Doom's real identity, and the final purpose of the multiverse won't make sense until everything converges. Because in the final chapter of this breakdown, the theory reaches its climax, the moment Kang and Doom collide in a war hidden behind every victory and every tragedy in the MCU. And trust me, once you see the whole picture, everything changes. The moment the branches exploded beyond control, I believe the multiverse entered a countdown one Kang had been trying to delay for longer than any mortal lifespan could measure. And as these timelines diverged, twisted, collided, and multiplied in ways no single entity could manage, the Doom pattern began to reform with terrifying precision. This is where the story reaches its hidden climax. The quiet, unseen war between Kang and Dr. Doom, a war that predates the MCU we know and stretches beyond the horizons of anything the characters themselves understand. What fascinates me most is how subtle the early signs are. Not giant cosmic events, not literal armies marching from universe to universe. Doom's conquest doesn't start with explosions. It starts with small fractures, timelines where Doom acquires a relic, or encounters a cosmic entity, or discovers a sliver of forbidden knowledge. And every time the multiverse branches uncontrolled, one of those slivers inevitably appears somewhere. Kang's pruning wasn't random. It was surgical. Each branch he removed was one more timeline where Doom gained an advantage. But now the multiverse is an open system again, and those once forbidden sequences of events are blooming like weeds after a storm. And as soon as they ignite, the collapse begins. That's why the Council of Kangs behaves with such frantic energy. They're not plotting domination. They're scrambling to anticipate Doom's return, trying desperately to predict where the first catastrophic breach will occur. But they're too unstable, too chaotic, too fractured to do what He Who Remains once did alone. They can sense the storm, but they can't contain it. This brings us to the collision course, Kang versus Doom, not as two villains clashing, but as two visions for the multiverse itself. Doom seeks absolute dominion fueled by ego, intellect, and unshakable belief in his supremacy. Kang seeks order not as a throne, but as a necessity. Doom's rise destroys universes. Kang's rule preserves them. When you place these two forces side by side, Kang stops looking like a conqueror and starts looking like the reluctant guardian of an impossibly fragile system. He Who Remains wasn't warning Loki and Sylvie about his variants because he feared them personally. He was warning them because with him gone, the multiverse would eventually produce the one being not even the combined council of Kangs could stop. Doom. The inevitability is tragic. Doom doesn't have to try. All he needs is time to rediscover the power he lost when Kang sealed away the branches. Time to rebuild the connections that lead to beyonder level ascension. And now, with the timelines running wild again, every spark that could lead Doom down that path is free to grow. What Kang tried to suppress for centuries is rising again, slowly at first, but inevitably. And the variants of Kang who survive have neither the unity nor the foresight to stop it. They weren't shaped by the war that forged He Who Remains. They haven't seen the destruction of infinite realities. They haven't watched Doom consume the multiverse the way the original Kang did. They're fighting blind, racing against a threat they don't fully understand, and in their panic, they're making mistakes, including mistakes that accelerate Doom's return. And here's the twist I think will redefine the entire multiverse saga once Marvel finally reveals it. Doom isn't just another cosmic villain waiting to appear. He's the reason the multiverse was ever controlled in the first place. He is the catalyst behind Kang's transformation, the shadow behind the TVA, the unseen hand that shaped every desperate choice Kang ever made. Doom is the true final boss. Not Thanos, not Kang, Doom. And that recontextualizes every major event in the MCU. The Infinity Saga, a ripple Kang ignored because it posed no threat to the sacred timeline because Thanos wasn't Doom. The emergence of the Celestials, a contained phenomenon, incapable of triggering Doom's rise. Even the incursions hinted at in Multiverse of Madness are early symptoms of an unstable reality drifting back toward the path Doom needs. Everything we assumed was random is actually part of a larger, hidden pattern, a pattern Kang had been suppressing for centuries. Now that the barriers are gone, the MCU's greatest threats aren't just multiversal. They are preordained. They are the rebuilding of Doom's destiny. And Kang, whether resurrected through variance or reassembled through time's natural correction, will find himself forced into the role he once accepted. The only one left who knows what Doom's victory truly looks like. And this is where the emotional weight of Kang's story hits me hardest. Because when you strip away the labels, conqueror, tyrant, manipulator, you're left with a man who carried the burden of infinite lives on his shoulders. A man who witnessed a future so catastrophic that he dedicated every version of himself to preventing it. A man who let the world hate him because fear was easier than the truth. He who remains never expected gratitude. He expected understanding, eventually. But Sylvie killed that possibility with one strike. Not because she was wrong to seek justice, but because she had no way of knowing the scale of what she had just undone. She believed she was ending tyranny. In reality, she restarted the countdown to multiversal annihilation. And Kang, wherever his remaining variants roam, now has one final mission: delay Doom long enough for someone else, Loki, the Avengers, anyone, to understand the truth and continue the fight. Kang never saw himself as the hero, but he was willing to be the villain to keep the multiverse alive. And that's the kind of sacrifice that pushes this theory beyond fan speculation into mythology-level storytelling. As the timelines multiply, as universes collide, as incursions tear apart worlds, the underlying pattern becomes clearer. The multiverse is reshaping itself into a battlefield. And Doom is already moving through the shadows, slowly reclaiming the pathways Kang once erased. Every universe that breaks away from the sacred timeline increases the probability of Doom ascending. Every unstable branch is a corridor for him to gain new power. Every incursion is a symptom of Doom's impending influence. When the final conflict arrives, it won't be a random war. It will be the culmination of centuries of hidden combat between two men whose ideologies could not be more different. Doom wants total control because he thinks he deserves it. Kang wants structured order because he knows the alternative. And when their confrontation finally erupts on screen, it will reshape everything we know about the MCU. Not as a traditional hero-villain fight, but as the revelation of a war that has been raging behind every major event. Once audiences see the full truth, Kang's actions won't look villainous anymore. They'll look necessary, painful, tragic, and heroic in the bleakest possible way. So here's the final revelation of this entire breakdown. Kang wasn't the destroyer. He was the guardian. The one who waged a lonely, infinite war so the multiverse could exist at all. And Doom hidden, inevitable, reborn through the branches is the true destroyer the MCU has been secretly building toward. Kang wasn't lying when he said the multiverse would break without him. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't manipulating. He was warning. And now that his shield has fallen, the real story begins. A story no one in the MCU is prepared for. A story where Kang becomes the misunderstood protector, Doom becomes the ultimate threat, and the heroes we know become pawns in a war older than their universes. Once this all comes to light, the entire multiverse saga will reframe itself. Kang didn't fall into villainy. He fell into sacrifice. And Doom didn't rise through fate. He rose through inevitability. And that completes the full theory, Kang as the hero who sacrificed everything, and Doom as the destroyer waiting in the shadows of every timeline. If you enjoyed this deep dive breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who needs to see the truth behind the multiverse. And a special thank you to the incredible supporter who dropped a $20 super thanks. Your support means the world and helps me create these massive theory videos. Until next time, this is Liam Harrison from MovieCast, and trust me, the multiverse has only just begun.